Master in Public Leadership. I'm very happy to be here, and you would have thought that, Maurice, where did you go? You would have thought that we planned our lectures or planned for this to make some kind of cohesive sense, right? Because I was sitting back there listening to you, I'm like, yeah, this is like right on. So everything that he just spoke about, very important for our own individual growth, of course, but if we are talking about leadership, it's of course also very, very important for organizational efficiency and effectiveness. So just to build on today's theme, and I'm going to move around a lot, I'm a professor, it's just what I like to do. So to build on today's theme, we're going to go through what we call cultural competence. How many of us have heard of this concept, this, yes, some, no? If you haven't, it's okay. So the title of my presentation is Leadership Through Cultural Competence, Understanding the Role of Values, Attitudes, and Beliefs. Three terms that we've probably heard a million times, but we're going to go into them a little bit more in depth, just to find out what we can do with them in order to be better leaders. Okay. One of the things that I definitely preach in any of my classes is that when you take any type of course, you should always get something out of it. And not just something out of it, but something that I can, okay, yeah, I figured it out, sorry. So, IT. But what can we do with the information that we gain, and can I, once I have this information, can I do something better or something new that I was unable to do prior to taking any sort of seminar, lecture, module, so on and so forth? So there are three basic things that I hope to have everyone get out of this today. The first one is being able to define and identify elements of culture. That word, just in my 5 minutes of sitting back there, was used about 3 or 4 times, right? We all probably have different conceptions and perceptions of what culture is, but by the end of this, hopefully we have something grounded a little more firmly. Second, I want us to be able to identify and define values, okay, and distinguish them from attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. Okay, 3 very distinctive concepts. Okay, the last thing I hope that we can do when we get out of here is use each of the above-mentioned concepts to become more culturally competent through 5 constructs. Okay, the first being cultural awareness, cultural knowledge, cultural skill, cultural encounters, and finally, cultural desire. Okay, and all of these 5 constructs work sort of in concert with one another. The reason I was trying to fix the volume is because I'd like us, before we begin, to watch briefly a video of an incident that happened in Maryland relatively recently, and it really will sort of set the table for us for the rest of the discussion.
Well, 2 co-workers evidently thought putting up a noose at their county office would be funny. That's according to one Anne Arundel County official. Now she's pushing the county to hire a compliance officer to make sure everyone is following discrimination and harassment laws. 11 News IT reporter Lisa Robinson is live in the newsroom with more on that story at 6 tonight. Lisa.
Well, there's certainly nothing funny about it. The county executive isn't laughing. She didn't hear about it from a supervisor, but she says she learned about it because she has an open door policy.
Once I was made aware of the situation, I could not sleep that night. Honestly, I was outraged.
Anne Arundel County Executive Laura Newman says in September an employee emailed her about an incident taking place in a county government office involving a noose.
The white employee made the noose while the black employee observed, and both exchanged inappropriate comments in jest.
In an effort to protect employees, Newman would not say in which department the incident occurred. She says the white employee who made the noose was disciplined, along with the black employee who observed. A third white employee who found the noose and left it in place for several weeks was also disciplined. Eventually, the black employee took the noose to a black supervisor.
If you know black history in our country, you know the history of the noose. And it's not a joking matter. It is threatening, and at the very least, it is insensitive.
As a result of the incident, Newman ordered sensitivity training for supervisors and managers in that department. She is also urging the county council to pass a resolution that would appoint a compliance officer to oversee these kinds of issues. Carl Snowden, with the Caucus of African American Leaders, agreed.
But it's alarming to discover that in 2014, in the county government, nooses are being constructed at a workplace. I think that the county council should move rapidly to create this compliance officer.
Now, the resolution is being heard on the very last day the county council can act before the general election. To date, the Office of Minority Affairs has hosted 30 diversity training sessions for more than 360 supervisors, managers, and assistants. Live in newsroom, Lisa Robinson, WBAL TV 11 News.
The next one would be cultural skill, which would be the ability to conduct cultural or needs and to conduct an assessment of what those needs are. And we're really going to do this by virtue of looking at the values, beliefs, and attitudes in order to understand individuals' behavior. Okay, to really sit down as a skill set and assess what is it that this person values, what do they believe, okay, and what are their attitudes in order to understand how we can either predict their behavior or understand their behavior better. Okay? The fourth one, cultural encounters, a direct engagement in cross-cultural interactions with individuals with diverse backgrounds. Where's the gentleman? I believe it was you. What's your name, sir?
Corey.
Corey? Yes. You had made the comment during Maurice's presentation about this idea of dialogue, correct? Was that you?
Yes.
Right? What was your purpose behind the idea of dialogue? What did you feel that it meant?
My intent there was the dialogue helps us to gain, gain understanding. You can use it as a tool rather to gain understanding where there is, miscommunication on the parts of two separate cultures.
And even forget, miscommunication, how about establishing communication at all? Right? You made the point in your presentation about, well, if a certain group is sitting at a table, that might not be as inviting, or it might be seen to someone as, you don't belong here, correct? But why is that the belief? Okay, why don't we find out what it is that people of other cultures and diversity and backgrounds, what do they talk about? What is important to them? Okay, this can go two ways, really. Okay, this can go from an internal standpoint, meaning the people who work within the organization. Okay, how do we engage in these encounters to find out what is important to them, but also, and this may be especially important, how do we do this externally with the people that we serve, whether you're in public service, okay, in a government institution, whether you're a business, okay, and especially when that bottom line matters, you have to understand what is important to those who you're actually coming in contact with, okay? So with these four frameworks, and this idea of values, beliefs, attitudes, what the heck do we do with them from a practical standpoint? How do we use them, right? Because it's one thing to say, well, I think he values health, I think he values inclusion, I think he values education, great, but now what do we do with them from a leadership perspective? We have to be able to transform them into some type of action or into some type of behavior that's going to ultimately better the organization. I want to give you sort of a hypothetical scenario here. And each of you has one of these sheets, okay? And I want us to take a few minutes to either as groups or individually, however you'd like to do it, but to try to, based on this brief one-sentence scenario, try to figure out what is going on here based on this person's behavior and based on the information that we have, okay? So in this scenario, a 64-year-old black male is reluctant to undergo cardiac catheterization because of a relative's bad experience and memories of the Tuskegee syphilis study. So clearly this scenario takes place in a hospital or in a healthcare environment, right? So the doctor's saying, excuse me, sir, you need this procedure in order for us to help you, okay? However, this 64-year-old black man is saying, sorry, you're not touching me, okay? So he's saying he's reluctant to undergo this procedure because a relative bad experience and memories of the Tuskegee syphilis study. Do we know what that is? How many of us are familiar with the Tuskegee syphilis study? Okay, tell me again? Demetrius. What happened in the Tuskegee syphilis?
There were a group of doctors, and they took in black males to undergo this test. So they temporarily infected them with the syphilis virus, even though they had the vaccination, but they want to use kind of lab rats per se, to test out syphilis.
Yeah, that's pretty much what happened, right? So.
They make them think they were being treated.
Yes. So they believed that they were actually engaging in something that was going to help them. Meanwhile, they were being used, and ultimately many of them died, right? By engaging in this type of experiment, okay? So this scenario, and then again, he said it was all black men who had to go through this, okay? So then in this scenario, the 64-year-old black man was reluctant to undergo this, number one, because he had a relative's bad experience, so he's sort of gone through that, but probably even more so, it's probably reflective of a larger issue that he has, right? So here's what I would like us to do. First, based on what we know, and based on his behavior, which again is avoiding necessary medical procedure, he needs this, okay? So if you put ourselves from the healthcare administrator or the doctor's perspective, how is he going to handle this to ultimately let this person know, look, this is going to help you, I'm not going to hurt you. Okay, but he has to be able to explain this in a way that is reflective of his cultural values, beliefs, and his attitudes. Okay? So what I'd like us to do here is for each of us to, based on what we know, what values does he have, okay, that are leading him to behave this way? What beliefs and attitudes does he have that are leading him to behave this way? Okay? If you look on the next, or the back side, how can we put our four constructs in action? How can the hospital, in this instance, anyone who's in leadership who needs to deal with this individual, how can they utilize cultural awareness, knowledge, skill, and cultural encounter in order to ultimately fix this scenario? Okay, so I know we're sort of running out of time here. What time do I have till?
Till about 5.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so take a few minutes, get with your groups, talk about it. Start by trying to identify values, beliefs, attitudes, and then maybe just sort of work your way to the backside. And to try to come up with a strategic outcome that's going to help us fix and help this 64-year-old man who is clearly afraid. We have a few minutes left, about 5 to be exact. So I want to, sort of before we wrap this up, I want us to see what you all came up with, and especially with respect to the values, beliefs, and attitudes. One of the points that I made to the table back here, and the reason why this is significant is because usually the first thing we're able to see and identify is what? Behavior, right? That's the easiest thing for you to see. If someone's like, hell no, get that thing away from me, right? You can see that behavior, but you don't know what that's really grounded in until you do some work, right? And once you do the work on the latter three sort of areas, then you can really come up with a plan that might be cultural competency based in order to most effectively help this person, right? Because one thing we can say is like, strap him down, we got to give it to him, right? Sure, that's an alternative. But what is that going to do for him, both short term and long term, right? So once you see the behavior, the task at hand is how to go through these 3 steps in order to more effectively understand that behavior, and then to guide your own behavior after that, right? So what are some of the values that people came up with respect to this gentleman here who does not want this? What values do you think he holds and sort of explain what's going on. He values life, for sure, right? Because he's thinking like, I don't want you to touch me, I could die, right? I've seen it, I've heard of it happening before, I definitely value life. What else?
Values his health.
Independence? How so? His choice, right? His choice is, I heard another one.
His health.
His what?
Health.
His health, for sure. Values health, his independence, his life. What else? If we look deep, we might, his culture, right? He definitely values his culture, for sure. He values family, right? We can see that if we look in here, like you heard somebody who was close to me, right? So he definitely would say, we know he values family. What beliefs do we think he has?
The medical professionals aren't trustworthy.
Medical professionals are not trustworthy, right? Now again, this doesn't have to necessarily say whether or not he engaged with them or not, but it's just his belief. Not trustworthy, that's his belief, okay? Now his attitude is going to tell us more about that. What is his attitude? Or what attitudes does he possess? Then that really tell us what's going on here. Since healthcare professionals are untrustworthy, I am fearful and I don't want any part of it, right? So that's his attitude, right? Ultimately, again, sort of come full circle, now we know why he's doing this, right? So let me just go through some of these that I put up here. Again, there's no one right answer, but these are some of the things that I sort of looked at. If he values, as some of you said, his health, he values trust for sure, and he values family. A belief he has, and it was right here, healthcare workers have mistreated my family and my race in the past. That's his belief, right? In his attitude, healthcare workers have mistreated my family and my race in the past, so I don't trust them. And we know that distrust clearly is a negative attitude, right? So what can be done about it? From a cultural awareness perspective, again, we're looking at this from the doctor's perspective, or maybe a hospital administrator to try to help this gentleman. From an awareness standpoint, we can say, while the need for the procedure is rational from a medical profession perspective, again, culture can be profession-oriented. So the doctors could say, damn it, he needs this. If he doesn't get this, he could die, okay? That's rational for the doctor, but not for the individual, right? So he has to step out of what is comfortable and knowledgeable for him and say, okay, I have to figure out what values, attitudes, and beliefs are grounded in his culture and his experience to figure out what's going on, okay? Another thing that could happen, not all of us in here knew what the Tuskegee experiments were. Maybe this doctor has no idea what they are either, okay? But maybe he can seek information to understand the breadth of these experiments and how it impacted not only individuals who went through it, but maybe even family members, cities, regions, lineage, so on and so forth, okay? That's something you can do cultural knowledge. Cultural skill, again, that's a lot of this, right? Assessing the values, attitudes, and beliefs. And finally, in the cultural encounter, from a strategic standpoint, utilizing empathy to engage with the patient by explaining the necessity of the procedure while acknowledging his values and explaining how those values that he has, how do they fit within contemporary medicine? This isn't the 30s, okay? So if you value health, you value trust, you value family, how do those values fit with what we do now, right? Okay, I'm gonna get your family's consent. They're gonna oversee everything. Don't worry, it's not just gonna be me in the room. Whatever he has to do, but he has to see that this is how we do things now. So please, you can be at ease. We're going to take care of it, right? The final construct against cultural desire, this basically means that leaders, organizations, they have to have a strategic plan, if you will, to integrate all of these cultural skill sets, awareness, skill, encounter, so on and so forth, into their own organizational culture. Make it a part of what you do on a regular basis, and not from a perspective of being reactionary, right? As in the video we saw, now they have to do some diversity training. But it's sort of almost too late, right? It's sort of after the fact. Cultural competence is telling you don't be reactionary, but have it as a part of your normative or the behavior that you expect on a day-to-day basis. Have it a part of what you do regularly, okay? So it shouldn't be done just to punish someone because they did something wrong or because your regulations say so. You should do it because it's the right thing to do, it's the effective thing to do. Ultimately, it's the ability to infuse values of empathy, meaning understanding what other people are going through and responding, again, to those values, attitudes, and beliefs. We want to do as much as we can to engage with cultural informants, people who can give us insight to what cultures may be thinking. And this ultimately brings us cultural humility, which is sort of the opposite of this idea of cultural imposition, but it's saying like, look, our way or our belief isn't always the right way. We have to figure out more, okay? We're going to sort of end here. Cultural competence is not simply having an interpreter or printed materials in various languages. Okay? So it's not going to say, go get that guy, he speaks Spanish. You need to know what he's saying, right? That's not necessarily cultural competence, okay? It also is not studying a few members of a particular group and assuming you have an expertise or an ability to make generalizations, right? Well, we have a black worker in our organization. Go ask him what he thinks about what all black people do. No, right? Well, because there are actually studies that show us that within ethnic groups, there's more variation than across ethnic groups, right? So you can go to an individual of a particular culture or ethnicity and sort of try to find out what is important to them, but understanding that that is individualized, it may not be the same, right? A person from California is different from a person from Texas, so you got to figure out where those differences lie, even though we're all Americans, right? So you can't just make this studying happen and then assume you know everything, okay? Because that leads to stereotypes and all of the kinds of things that, again, sort of put us back to square one. But it is this idea of trying to do our best to find out. Well, in here, are we culturally incompetent on purpose? A lot of times, no, right? It has to do somewhat with awareness, but as Baseman and his idea of bounded ethicality, where he tells us there are two reasons sort of why we do things that might be perceived as wrong. One being we have in-group favoritism. We can all sort of attest to this, right? We like to be with people who we think are like us and share values, so that's why we behave in certain ways to be around others who are like us. And it's not necessarily wrong, but by virtue of being, sort of looking for the in-group, you are naturally being exclusive, right? So you're creating an outlet, right? The next thing he said, sort of what we talked about earlier, is this idea that we have implicit attitudes about people, about things, about places that we don't necessarily know. So sometimes those creep up and make us behave in ways that we don't even know as to why we're doing that. Why is cultural competence important for leaders in 2014 and beyond? Just some quick statistics up here. Population by race and ethnicity, actual and projected from 1960, 2011, and 2015. Again, we know culture goes beyond just race and ethnicity, but these are very telling in terms of how our country and how the landscape is changing. And I know this is tiny, so I'll sort of read these. In 1960, whites were 85% of the total population. In 2011, they were 63%. Projected by 2050, they'll be 47%. Blacks, Hispanics, in 1960 were 3.5%. In 2050, it's projected that they'll be almost 30% of the population of the United States. Blacks have sort of remained steady from 11 to 13%, and Asians have gone from almost 1% and projected by 2050 to be almost 10%. Okay, so we can look at this and say, why does this matter in business, in education, in government services? I think that the answers are clear. Is because our society is becoming more and more integrated with different values, beliefs, and cultures, and your ability to be effective in your business or to educate or to provide services is going to be largely predicated on your ability to do these things and understand where cultures come from, okay? That's it. Sorry I went over by 5 minutes. Thank you. Any questions? feel free to ask me. I'll hang around for a little bit afterwards. Here's my information. You have that there with you. I do want to give one plug for the master's degree in public leadership we have starting this spring. So if you are interested in that, I do have some information on that as well. It is a 39-hour degree, so roughly 2 years if you go full-time. But it is online, so that is a benefit to all of us professionals who have a lot of things to do and not a lot of time to go to school in a traditional sense. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and good luck to everybody.